It's Christmas Day in Gainesville, Florida, a time when most families are gathered around living rooms, unwrapping gifts or preparing holiday meals. But in the parking lot of a neighborhood Walgreens, something unthinkable is about to unfold. And the entire moment, every second of it, is quietly recorded by a security camera mounted high above the store entrance. A silent witness to a tragedy that no one in that parking lot could have imagined was coming. The camera shows a vehicle pull into the lot, another already parked nearby, and what appears to be a routine meeting between adults who know each other. At first glance, nothing about the scene suggests danger. It's the middle of the afternoon. Cars move in and out of the pharmacy drive-through, and a few customers walk in and out carrying small bags, completely unaware that within seconds, their ordinary holiday moment will become the center of a homicide investigation. Then, suddenly, the calm shatters. A woman steps forward, and gunfire erupts. Two people are struck almost immediately. One collapses. Another struggles to stay upright as the sound echoes through the lot. In those terrifying seconds, the woman who investigators would later identify as 38-year-old Amanda turns and rushes back toward her vehicle. The security camera catches her again just moments later as she speeds away from the scene, leaving behind a wounded man, a dying woman, and a parking lot filled with stunned witnesses trying to process what they just saw. But fate and timing intervene. Almost instantly, just a short distance away, a police officer is already on duty working a traffic crash along a nearby road. Over the radio comes the urgent call. Shots fired at the Walgreens on 13th Street and 39th Avenue. Before the full details are even clear, the officer spots a vehicle matching the description speeding away from the direction of the scene. Without hesitation, he pulls out and begins pursuit, lights flashing as the situation escalates from a violent shooting into a full-blown police chase racing through the streets of Gainesville. While that pursuit unfolds, other officers are racing toward the Walgreens parking lot where the violence first erupted. When they arrive, they are met with chaos. One victim is lying on the ground. Another is badly injured. Officers rush in to provide aid while trying to understand what happened. A wounded man struggles to speak as officers kneel beside him. "Who shot you?" one officer asks, trying to gather the critical information needed to track down the suspect. The man answers through pain. "Amanda Jensen." The officer repeats the name to make sure he heard correctly. "Amanda, who?" "Jensen." "Amanda Jensen," the victim says again. The officer presses further, needing to understand why this happened. "Why'd she shoot you?" The response is almost surreal in its simplicity. The wounded man explains that the shooting happened during a custody exchange involving their infant daughter. What was supposed to be a routine meeting between parents had instead exploded into deadly violence. Nearby, officers continue attempting life-saving measures for the woman who had been shot. Her name, investigators would soon confirm, was 31-year-old Anna Terrill. For several minutes, first responders worked desperately in the parking lot trying to save her life. But the injuries are devastating. The scene that began as a holiday afternoon errand has become a homicide investigation. Meanwhile, miles away, the high-speed pursuit that began moments after the shooting is approaching its dramatic conclusion. Police vehicles close in around the suspect car as it finally slows and comes to a stop. Officers jump out with weapons drawn, their voices sharp and urgent as they shout commands captured clearly by body cameras. "Show me your hands. Show me your hands. Get out of the car." The tension is palpable. Multiple officers are shouting at once, trying to maintain control of a dangerous situation that could escalate at any second. "Watch your," one officer yells, reminding others of the risk as they surround the vehicle. Again, the commands come. "Show me your hands. Hands up. Get out of the car." For several seconds there is no compliance. and the uncertainty of what might happen next hangs in the air. Finally, the driver's door opens. The woman inside begins to step out, but instead of immediately surrendering, she says something that momentarily stuns the officers surrounding her. She asks to hug her children. Inside the car, officers can see several young kids sitting in the back seats. One officer responds firmly, ordering her again to comply and move toward them. "Come here now," he shouts. But the woman repeats that her kids are in the car. The officers now realize just how complicated this situation has become. Not only are they dealing with the suspect in a deadly shooting, but there are multiple children present inside the vehicle. One officer quickly radios the update while continuing to give commands. She's not complying to our orders right now. She wants to give her kids a hug. Another officer adds urgently, "There's small kids in the car." Still, the commands continue. "Do not move. Do not move." Eventually, the suspect lowers herself to the ground, as ordered. Officers move in carefully, placing her into custody while maintaining control of the scene. Body camera footage captures the moment one officer confirms over the radio, "Driver's out and prone down right now." The woman is then guided to her feet and escorted away from the vehicle. Investigators identify her as Amanda Jangin, the same name the wounded victim had given officers back at the Walgreens parking lot. What makes the situation even more disturbing is the discovery that Janshan had 5 children in the car during the incident, including an infant just 11 months old. As officers begin securing the scene of the stop, one asks her about the children still inside the vehicle. "How old are your kids?" he asks. She answers quietly, 11 months. 4. The officer continues counting. "How many more in there?" 2, 7, 17, 10, 14, she responds, listing the ages as officers begin carefully removing the frightened children from the vehicle one by one. Another officer scans the ground nearby and quickly spots a handgun lying just outside the suspect's car, the likely weapon used moments earlier in the Walgreens parking lot. The firearm is secured as evidence, while officers reassure one another that, at least for now, the immediate danger is over. One officer speaks to the colleague who initiated the chase, acknowledging how critical that quick decision was. "Good job keeping up with it," he says. "You could have left, and this all wouldn't have been solved." It's a brief moment of recognition amid a chaotic day. "Right now, everyone's okay," the officer adds, glancing toward the children. "The kids are okay." I like that part. But back at the Walgreens, investigators know the situation is far from okay. Radio. Traffic continues as detectives and supervisors attempt to piece together what exactly happened during those few violent seconds. We've got a very evolving scene. One officer reports double shooting. Suspect vehicle was involved in a pursuit. Car has been stopped. Another update follows as paramedics transport the injured man away from the parking lot. The male victim was just loaded up, an officer says over the radio. "I don't know his condition." And then there's the devastating update about the woman still lying near her car. For nearly 10 minutes, responders had worked to revive her. But the outcome is becoming heartbreakingly clear. The ordinary Christmas afternoon that began with errands and family plans has turned into a crime scene, a police chase, an arrest, and the beginning of a long investigation into how a custody exchange between adults ended with gunfire, death, and 5 children sitting in the back seat of the car that carried the suspect away. Christmas afternoon in Gainesville, Florida, was unraveling minute by minute as officers tried to understand what had just happened in the Walgreens parking lot. And over the police radio, the information was coming in fragment pieces of a story that still didn't quite make sense. Dispatchers relayed what one of the victims had reportedly said before being transported to the hospital, that the confrontation was tied to a custody exchange and that the woman who fired the gun had accused someone in the other vehicle of being a child molester. Officers repeated the details carefully over the air, trying to verify what was rumor and what was fact. Radio traffic says something about a custody issue. One officer explained at the scene, said she wasn't going to turn over a kid to a child molester. That's what the guy told us. He said before he left that she shot him during a custody exchange. Investigators quickly began writing the name down that the wounded man had given them. Amanda J. According to the early reports, the meeting in the Walgreens parking lot had been planned as a court-ordered child exchange. 2 adults arriving to hand off a child. A routine process families across the country go through every day. But here, on Christmas Day, it had somehow turned deadly. Officers continued talking through the radio traffic as they worked the scene. Amanda Janshin, one officer repeated aloud while speaking to another deputy. They were supposed to be doing a court-ordered child exchange right here in the parking lot. Nearby, witnesses who had been shopping inside the store just minutes earlier were now being interviewed by investigators trying to reconstruct the exact sequence of events. One man described how he had been walking toward the store when everything suddenly erupted into chaos. "Well, I was getting ready to go inside to use the bathroom," he explained, still shaken by what he had witnessed. "And when I did, there was this guy standing here, another guy that works here, and all of a sudden I heard yelling. Then this guy came out and grabbed hold of the other guy and pulled him inside, and I thought, somebody's getting shot." The witness paused for a moment, replaying the moment in his mind. "So I said, I'm getting the hell out of here. I ran back to my truck to leave, but the truck is big, and when I tried to put it in reverse, I couldn't back out fast enough." What happened next only added to the confusion. The witness described another vehicle crashing into the back of his truck as someone tried to escape the parking lot. "Soon as I hit the back of that pickup truck," he said, "this little Kia slammed into us and pushed us out of the way so they could get through." Officers wrote down every detail. Even the smallest observation could help them reconstruct the seconds before the gunfire and the moments immediately afterward. Meanwhile, just miles away, the woman at the center of the investigation had already been taken into custody following the high-speed pursuit that ended with her surrendering to police. As officers searched her, they began finding items that raised even more questions. One deputy reported that a gun magazine had been found in her pocket. "She had a magazine in one pocket," the officer told colleagues. "Not sure if she's got anything else on her." Another officer approached the suspect and asked her directly, "Do you have any weapons on you?" he asked. She answered quietly. The officers continued their search, carefully checking every pocket. "What's your name?" they asked again for confirmation. "Amanda," she responded. "Amanda, what's your last name?" "Janshon," she replied. Investigators would later determine that the shooting had unfolded with shocking speed. According to the evidence gathered, Amanda Janshon allegedly fired multiple rounds at the 2 victims' 3 shots each before running back to her car and fleeing the scene, leading officers on a 13-mile pursuit before finally being stopped. As officers secured the suspect at the roadside stop, more questions were asked while body cameras captured every second. "Amanda, hop out for me," one officer said calmly as they prepared to move her to a patrol car. Another officer added, "I'm going to assist you." They continued checking her for weapons or anything that could harm the officers or herself. "You got anything that's going to poke me?" one deputy asked, while searching her pockets. "No," she answered. "Are you sure?" the officer pressed, making sure there was nothing hidden. The suspect glanced at the officers' uniforms and asked a question of her own. "Do you have cameras?" she asked. The officer responded honestly. "Yeah, we have body cameras," he explained. "Our cars don't have cameras, but we have body cams." As the search continued, another discovery was made. One officer held up an item they had removed from her pocket. "This was in there," he said. "I pulled it off." It was another loaded magazine for the handgun. Officers realized the seriousness of what they were dealing with. According to police reports later released, the search of the suspect revealed not just one, but 2 loaded gun magazines, in addition to the firearm, recovered outside the vehicle. Back at the Walgreens, witnesses continued telling investigators what they saw and heard. One man described the moment he realized something terrible was happening. "I heard the shots," he said. 5 shots in just a few seconds. He explained that he had been on his way into the store, but froze when the gunfire started. "I heard the first pop, and I thought, what was that? Then I saw smoke and heard more shots." The witness pointed toward the corner of the parking lot where the victims had been standing. "I walked over toward the Walgreens entrance," he said, "and there was a guy bleeding. He was pointing at the car parked next to his." The witness described the rhythm of the gunfire as it echoed across the lot. "It was like pow, pow, then a pause, then pow, pow, pow," he said. Like whoever fired it had already hit both of them and then fired again. Investigators carefully wrote down every word. Another witness said they hadn't actually seen the shooter, but had heard the gunshots clearly. "As soon as I came around the corner," the person said, "there was blood everywhere." The witness recalled telling an officer something unusual in that moment. "I said I wanted to pray for her," they explained quietly, "because I knew she was dying." As officers continued collecting witness statements, the suspect, now in custody, asked a question that momentarily stunned those nearby. "They dead?" she asked. For a moment, there was silence. One officer answered carefully, "Yeah," he said quietly. The response seemed to sink in. "Holy Christmas," someone muttered under their breath nearby, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had happened. Meanwhile, investigators continued sorting through evidence and coordinating the growing scene. Officers discussed the gun magazines recovered during the arrest. Where was the second mag at? One deputy asked another. "Right here," came the reply. Radios continued crackling with updates from both scenes, the Walgreens parking lot and the roadside stop where the suspect had been arrested. One officer switched channels to coordinate resources. "Channel 1 should be up there," someone said while organizing communications. "Channel 2. Inside the Walgreens store, another witness described the moment the news spread among customers. "I was inside buying a couple last-minute food things for my parents for Christmas tonight," the person explained. "Then somebody ran in and yelled that there was a shooting outside." The witness said several customers immediately ran toward the doors to see what was happening. "We all ran outside," they said, "and that's when we saw the car fly by." Another bystander who had been outside described seeing the suspect vehicles speeding away from the lot, with officers already moving to respond. Meanwhile, officers were now dealing with another urgent reality: the children found inside the suspect's vehicle during the traffic stop. "We've got 5 kids, one officer said over the radio while discussing transportation arrangements. The challenge was immediate. Patrol cars were not equipped to transport that many young passengers safely. "We might need 2 cars," someone suggested, while another officer asked if family members could be contacted to take custody of the children. As investigators continued gathering statements, some witnesses began speculating about what might have led to the violence. One person told officers they believed the suspect may have been following the victims before they arrived at the Walgreens. "It looked like they pulled into that last parking lot to hide," the witness said. "And then she saw them and came around the corner, and it was just bam, 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 and it was over." Another witness offered a completely different theory, suggesting it might have been related to drugs, though investigators had no evidence supporting that claim. Officers documented every statement carefully, knowing that eyewitness accounts, accurate or not, can help paint a fuller picture once investigators begin comparing security footage and forensic evidence. But one thing was already certain: what began as a planned custody exchange on Christmas Day had ended in gunfire. A woman dead, another man wounded, and 5 children sitting in the back seat of the car that carried the suspected shooter away from the scene. In the final hour before everything unraveled, what began as an ordinary stop at a neighborhood pharmacy would spiral into a moment so chaotic that witnesses would spend the next several minutes trying to understand whether what they heard were gunshots or something far more ordinary, because one man standing quietly at the register would later tell investigators that when the first 3 sharp cracks echoed through the parking lot, his first thought wasn't violence at all. It was confusion, a startled pause, the kind of moment when your mind searches for a harmless explanation. And he actually wondered aloud if maybe it was just a car backfiring. But within seconds, that fragile assumption shattered as he stepped toward the front door, looked out through the glass, and saw something no one expects to witness on an ordinary day: the sudden burst of movement. A vehicle pulling away. A police cruiser already beginning to chase. And in the middle of it all, a scene unfolding so quickly that the details seemed almost impossible to process. Near the vehicle, a woman was on the ground, partially outside the car, while a man stood nearby. And then, the witness saw something that froze him in place. Something that would replay in his mind again and again. He watched as the woman raised a gun and fired 2 more times, the sharp pops cutting through the air. And although he couldn't say with certainty whether both bullets struck the man, he did see the moment the man collapsed, dropping to the pavement while repeating a sentence that seemed almost painfully simple in the middle of such violence. "I'm just trying to get my kid." Words that would linger in the minds of officers and investigators alike as the scene transformed from confusion into a full-scale emergency. Within minutes, law enforcement officers were managing not only the shooting, but the complicated human aftermath surrounding it. Because inside the suspect's vehicle were children, 5 of them. Young witnesses to a moment no child should ever see. And as officers began carefully separating the chaos into manageable pieces, one of them spoke calmly to the woman who had just fired the shots, trying to understand where the children could go safely while the investigation unfolded, asking her gently but firmly who she would trust to take custody of them that day, reminding her that there were 5 children but only 2 car seats in the patrol vehicle, explaining that his priority was making sure the kids were safe and delivered to someone she trusted, a family member, perhaps, someone they were already heading toward before the shooting happened. Because even in the middle of such a violent moment, the officers had to think about practical things like safety and placement, and the emotional shock those children were now carrying. While that careful conversation continued on one side of the scene, investigators on the other side began the slow, methodical work of understanding exactly how those final minutes had unfolded, piecing together the movement of the suspect vehicle as it pulled into the lot near a small display where bags of chips were stacked outside, noting how the woman had initially been sitting in the passenger seat before stepping out and crouching behind the car in a posture that suggested fear or hesitation, but then somehow returning toward the vehicle again. And that was the moment the surveillance video became crucial, because the footage captured the shooter moving deliberately around to the passenger side, raising the weapon and firing twice, 3 times, before reaching inside the car and firing again. The repetitive flashes of the gun stark against the ordinary background of a pharmacy parking lot. What made the moment even more disturbing, investigators would later say, was what happened next. Because one of the Childana teenagers suddenly rushed out of the vehicle, visibly panicked, trying desperately to stop the woman, shouting in disbelief as the violence unfolded right in front of them. And one officer, watching the footage afterward, could barely hide his shock, shaking his head and saying quietly that it was almost impossible to comprehend how something so extreme could happen in front of the very children she was trying to protect. By that time, officers had already placed the woman into a patrol vehicle, carefully checking her once more before transport, asking the routine but necessary questions every officer must ask: whether she had anything on her that might have been missed during the search, whether there would be any problems during the ride to the station, because even when emotions are running high, procedure matters. Nearby, investigators were walking slowly across the pavement, scanning for physical evidence, and one officer pointed down to a brass casing glinting near the curb. counting aloud as he and another detective located more 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spent casings scattered across the asphalt, a number that immediately matched what at least one witness had reported hearing. 5 distinct shots, a detail that helped confirm the early timeline of events. Another bystander had even told officers she recognized the sound pattern, remarking that it reminded her of a Glock being fired. A small but useful observation that investigators quietly added to their growing list of facts. At the same time, another witness, a man who had been nearby and legally carrying his own firearm, described how he instinctively reached for it when the shooting began but couldn't draw it fast enough before the moment passed, later telling officers he thought the man being shot might have been some kind of threat at first, until the reality of the situation became clearer. Meanwhile, inside the patrol car, the woman's composure began to break, her voice trembling as she spoke through tears, apologizing repeatedly, saying she believed the man had harmed her child and that she simply couldn't take it anymore, insisting she never meant to drag the officers into something so devastating. And the officer sitting nearby responded with calm restraint, explaining that he wasn't asking her questions at that moment, that his main concern right now was letting her know that her children were safe and none of them had been injured, that they were with detectives and officers who were taking care of them, and if he learned anything further regarding their condition, he would let her know. The request she made next was simple and heartbreakingly human: water and a few tissy small comforts, in a moment when her world had suddenly collapsed around her. Back at the crime scene, detectives studied the surveillance footage again, noticing that the camera angle captured the shooter moving clearly across one portion of the lot while leaving another area just outside the frame, meaning the crucial moment of the shooting itself was partially visible, but not entirely. Yet, even with those limitations, the video showed enough to outline the sequence of events with chilling clarity. And as investigators continued assembling that timeline, the final piece of the puzzle came from the man who had been shot, because despite his injuries, he survived long enough to speak with detectives at the hospital. And when one investigator sat beside him to gently ask what had led to this confrontation, the wounded man explained that the conflict stemmed from a court order involving custodian arrangement that granted both parents equal time with their child. A fifth agreement that had been established on Christmas Day, an agreement that should have ensured shared parenting. But somehow, in the tense final minutes leading up to that meeting in the pharmacy parking lot, that fragile legal arrangement had collided with fear, anger, and suspicion, setting the stage for a confrontation that escalated in seconds and left an entire family forever changed in the span of the last 60 minutes. In the final hour before the truth of that violent afternoon was finally pieced together, investigators sat beside the wounded man in a hospital room, quietly asking the questions that would help reconstruct the chain of events. And when the detective asked how he knew the woman had gone to CVS instead of the Walgreens, where they were supposed to meet, the man explained that they had actually been watching her movements closely that day, because the custody exchange had already been tense. And at one point, they saw her vehicle and realized she had driven to a different pharmacy location, something that immediately struck them as strange. He told the detective that they drove toward the area and noticed her car leaving. But instead of simply continuing on her way, she suddenly turned around and began following them again, making a quick U-turn and pulling into the turning lane behind their vehicle, which made the situation feel even more uncomfortable and uncertain. So the driver, his close friend who had agreed to give him a ride, turned into the CVS parking lot, hoping perhaps that stopping in a public place would keep things calm. But instead, the tension seemed to grow as the woman's car rolled into the lot and stopped several spaces away from them. The man explained that his friend initially pulled her car beside the woman's vehicle, as if to start the exchange. But the woman abruptly shook her head and instead drove away from them again, looping around toward the pharmacy drive-through lane, before circling back into the parking lot once more. And those few minutes of uncertainty felt long and confusing because he stood outside the vehicle waiting, unsure what she planned to do, wondering why the simple custody exchange had suddenly turned into such a strange series of movements. According to his account, nearly 2 minutes passed while he remained standing beside the car, watching and waiting, before she finally pulled up again and stepped out of her vehicle, approaching slowly while asking who else was inside the car with him. A question he answered simply by saying the person inside was his ride, but she continued pressing the issue, repeating the question and walking closer as if trying to look inside the car herself. And then, something in that moment seemed to snap, because he described how her posture suddenly changed and she pulled out a firearm, so quickly that the situation turned from tense conversation to life-threatening violence in seconds. The man told the detective that the first shot appeared to strike his friend, the driver, and from his perspective it looked as though the bullet hit her in the head. A horrifying moment that caused him to jump backward toward the passenger side of the car in pure instinctive panic, trying to escape the line of fire while realizing the shooter was now moving toward him. He described scrambling through the passenger door and attempting to climb into the back seat as the gunshots continued, trying to remember the order of the shots, even though everything had happened so quickly that the sequence blurred together. But he believed the first shot struck him while he was still standing outside the vehicle, hitting his arm. And that was the moment he dove into the car, attempting to crawl across the seat to shield himself. Yet, even as he tried to escape, he said, the gunfire continued, with another shot striking him in the back while he was halfway inside the vehicle, and a later shot hitting his leg as he struggled to move away. Throughout the chaos, he remembered hearing the woman shouting words that seemed filled with accusation and anger, repeating that he had caused this, that he had made the situation happen. Statements that suggested the shooting was fueled by something deeply emotional rather than a random act of violence. When the detective asked why she might have believed that, the injured man offered a painful explanation, saying that jealousy had played a major role because the woman had apparently read text messages between him and his close female friend. Messages where he had told his friend that he loved her. A phrase he explained was simply an expression of friendship between two people who had known each other for a long time, but he believed the woman could not accept that a man and a woman could share a platonic bond, and that misunderstanding, combined with the already fragile situation involving custody of the child, had created a storm of suspicion and resentment that finally exploded in the pharmacy parking lot. As the detective listened, the quiet hospital room stood in stark contrast to the chaos that had unfolded less than an hour earlier. But the investigation outside was continuing to move forward just as quickly, because back at the police station, officers were preparing to escort the woman responsibly Mandine to custody for the formal booking process. And as one officer approached her, he spoke calmly but firmly, explaining that she likely already understood the seriousness of the situation and asking her to stand up and turn around so they could secure the handcuffs properly before transport to the jail. The routine steps of arrest unfolded slowly and methodically, with the officer offering her a final sip of water before tightening the cuffs, asking her to roll up her sleeves so he could ensure nothing was hidden underneath them, and carefully adjusting the restraints to fit her smaller wrists, while reminding her quietly not to do anything foolish during the process. Even in that moment, Amanda asked the question many suspects ask when the reality of an arrest settles in: what exactly she was being charged with, but the officer simply told her he would read the charges during the ride, continuing instead with the necessary identification questions, such as confirming her place of birth. In the hours and days that followed, those charges would become formal and devastating, because prosecutors ultimately charged Amanda with second-degree murder for the killing that occurred in the parking lot, along with attempted murder for the wounded victim, 5 separate counts of child neglect for exposing the children to the violence, and fleeing from law enforcement during the aftermath. Charges that together painted a grim legal picture of the decisions made during that chaotic hour. Court records later revealed that Amanda eventually entered a plea of no contest, and the court adjudicated her guilty on all 8 counts. A decision that carried enormous consequences, because the judge ultimately sentenced her to life in prison for the murder charge alone, followed by an additional 30 years for the remaining offenses, ensuring that the actions taken during those final explosive minutes would define the rest of her life. The court also issued another painful order, one that spoke to the emotional impact of the crime on the family itself. Amanda was prohibited from having any contact with her children, unless and until a therapist determined that such contact would be safe and appropriate. A condition reflecting the reality that those children had witnessed events no child should ever see. Meanwhile, back at the station, in the immediate aftermath of the arrest, officers continued handling the quieter practical details of the case, asking about phone numbers and belongings, trying to locate a family member, perhaps a sister, who could take responsibility for personal items and help coordinate care for the children while the legal process moved forward. One officer, noticing Amanda standing with her head pressed against the wall in the hallway, gently told her she didn't need to do that, explaining she wasn't in trouble in that moment and could simply lean against the wall if she wanted. A small gesture of humanity during a long and emotionally draining day for everyone involved. Before completing the booking process, the officer asked one final routine question that sometimes becomes important in jail intake procedures: whether she might be pregnant, and Amanda responded quietly that she hoped she was, though she wasn't certain, leaving yet another unanswered question lingering in the aftermath of a tragedy that had begun only an hour earlier with what should have been a simple custody exchange, but instead ended with gunfire, shattered families, and a life sentence that would echo far beyond those final 60 minutes.
If you liked this video and want more, click subscribe.